Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's ILTA webinar, 10 Truths of Legal Timekeeping. I'm Gail Persicelli with ILTA, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. Our speaker today is Peter Zavir, who is the president of Tikit North America and has been serving the legal market for over 2 decades. I would also like to thank Tikit for sponsoring today's webinar. Our presentation will run about 45 to 60 minutes, and all questions should be entered into the Q&A box. And if we do not answer them during the presentation, we will be addressing them at the end. Before we start, please know that we are recording today's webinar, and we'll post a link to our website under recordings shortly after today's presentation. At the end of the presentation, we ask that you take a few moments to complete the evaluation. At this time, I'll now turn the webinar over to Peter.
Thank you, Gail, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. Before we get going, I think it's important to define exactly when we're talking about the truths of legal timekeeping, what do we mean, especially in the context of this webinar, and especially in today's day and age. Really, the truth here is a derivative of my involvement in timekeeping deployments, pretty much over the last 2 decades, as Gail mentioned. 3 different best-of-breed timekeeping solutions, starting probably back in the year 2000, 100-plus firms, including law departments, 2 continents, and firm sizes or department sizes anywhere from 20 to 5,000 timekeepers. So really, the truth here is really more about experience. It's a derivative of my experience in this industry and in this technology and the business of law. A little preamble, I think you've seen this already in the session description, but a lot of forces are in play, especially since the new normal post-2008. The industry's changing. There's forces on the business side, as you can see, competition, fixed fee, pricing, compliance are all in the fold right now. New client relationships. And also technology's evolved. It's not, single interface, input, clerical, accounting work anymore. It's changed. There's more options, more endpoints, and consumer technologies has entered the foray. But at the end of the day, time is the backbone of service-based businesses. It's there, the core element in our business and our industry is still capturing time and then delivering value to customers. Truth number 1, and again, this has been overused and abused, and I'm actually going to abuse it again here in this session. The end of the billable hour. What I'm saying here is that the billable hour is not dead. It's just that the conversation has changed. And that's important. The conversation has moved from the billable hour. It's already qualified as an output metric. It's now moving into a cost accounting conversation, an input metric. So essentially what we're looking at here is dropping the word billable, which is a descriptor, and breaking it back down to the hour as the input metric. And that is the input for cost accounting. That gives us our production cost, and that allows us to price properly. So very simply, you capture, you record your units of production, you assign as many properties as possible, okay? And very important, because the more properties you assign, that's competitive advantage, that's insight, and that leads to better business decision-making. And that creates a valuable data source. So capture, record your units of production. Again, I'm using cost accounting terminology here, but at the end of the day, that's what it's about. So what we're doing here, we're tracking all hours. We're not talking billable hours. Again, different conversation, and creating this valuable data source that's going to be used for purposes we might not even know at this stage. There's always been debate. We're not going to be capturing non-billable time anymore. What we're saying, in any good business, you capture your inputs. Again, back to that cost accounting conversation, capture your inputs, create the data source, and then you're ready to, what we say, measure to manage, okay? So track all hours. This truth here is track everything, measure to manage, and that will lead to competitive advantage. Truth number 2, the future of best of breed timekeeping. Are we in an explosion or implosion mode now, or era? A little history here. Best of breed was timekeeping started back in the early 90s. The motivators back then were quite unique. It was about a UI experience for the lawyer, but also about offloading CPU cycles from the accounting systems, who at that time were not able to support 500, 1,000 timekeepers. Too much stress on the system. So they were actually promoting offloading the timekeeping role into third-party systems. Those were the motivators back then. Those motivators, at least one of them, does not exist today. If we look at the latest ILTA poll, ILTA survey, 2017, 25% of firms with 150 lawyers or less use best of breed, so it's a minority. On the other hand, the bigger size firms, 350 plus, the majority, 60%, use best of breed. And that's ironic, simply because they're investing much more money in their practice management systems, but they're still going out and looking for what we call the specialty system to capture time. So what are the motivators here? And what are the motivators going to be, unlike back in the 90s? What we see, and we work in this industry a lot, is obviously billing hygiene, compliance, the new client relationships, the lawyer experience is still there, and that's one of the motivators that has stood the test of time. Lawyers are not clerical. They want an experience that relates to the way they work. So that motivator still stands. And profitability, obviously, will these systems deliver more profitability? But there's a caveat here. In the old days, it was more was the goal, whereas now better quality seems to be the goal. And that relates back to that cost accounting conversation we just spoke about in the previous truth. So firms, what they want is they want to win on relationship by delivering credibility through the invoice and through the billing hygiene, but at the same time, better quality leading to better profitability. So I wanted both relationship and profitability. In this truth, I would say best of breed is on an explosion track. Consumer tech plus the new client relationship, one is a tech, one is a business driver, will propel the need for best of breed. And we're seeing it, and we're seeing a lot of the smaller firms are investing more in their timekeeping system than in their whole practice management system, which makes sense in the sense that we're at the start of the transaction cycle, and that's where the revenue generation is created. I think we have a poll here, Gail, maybe we put that up. So.
Okay, the poll is up and we're getting a good response. I'll let it go for a couple more seconds and then we'll shut it down and I can share the results. Okay.
There we go.
There are the results.
Okay. Interesting. Very close to the stats, actually. They are actually over in the sense of the value of best of breed, and the truth, what I was saying is we're in an explosion mode, and I think the stats here support that truth. Well, that's excellent. Okay, we're going to move it on. Motivation, truth number 3, motivation for contemporaneous timekeeping. Obviously, best practices dictates contemporaneous timekeeping. The question is, do we supplement, this best practice with carrot or stick? I mean, the stick approach, I live that world. I'm in that generation where I've seen the stick used many times. And I think it's also a question of generation. Millennials, Gen X are more accustomed to a carrot as a motivator. And I think where we are today is ideal. It's ideal because the timing is perfect. The consumer tech is the carrot today. You know, if you're gonna fuel contemporaneous capture, make sure the professionals, attorneys have the right capture mechanisms and the opportunity to capture anytime, anywhere. Consumer tech is spot on to act as the carrot. And the stick, we don't really need one. It's omnipresent. I call it omnipresent because the new client relationship today is really driving it. The stick is there. You know, we want to see work in progress on a weekly basis. We want to go into our file online. So you see the behavior or the properties of a stick every day in that relationship. They're looking for information. That means that, you know, the timekeeping role has to be, you know, imposed and delivered on a regular basis. So both of those are there, and the truth here is really the empowerment of the professionals eclipses punishment for sure in today's times, simply because of the generational issue. But consumer tech is the carrot, and I could have added there the client relationship and the business law today is the stick already, and it's there in force at all times. Moving on to number 4, passive timekeeping. Is it still the magic pill? Just as a definition here, the passive timekeeping is the ability to mine and transform electronic activities into time entries. You know, help me discover what I did on my electronic, using my electronic footprint to help generate time entries. 10 plus years ago, I still remember when this was brought to market. It was really labeled the next best mousetrap, or the silver bullet, magic pill, whatever it may be. But it was well received, especially for delinquent timekeepers who basically looked at this and said, hey, I got my timesheet created for me. It's free. It's no effort. And what we found over the last 10 plus years as we've used this technology is, you know, the activities created are not time entries, first and foremost. I call it the 3 C's. You need conversion, you need cleanse, and you need consolidation. And you're still not there because you have to add value. So there is effort to go from, you know, converting activities into time entries. However, and there are possibly side effects. It may promote procrastination and also conflicts a little bit with contemporaneous timekeeping. If you have promoted contemporaneous timekeeping and you have very, very diligent timekeepers, do they need the safety net of passive timekeeping? And is their quality and compliance an issue when we're converting these too quickly and the client is seeing a lot of what we call low value time entries as opposed to high value time entries? So there are possible side effects here, but the role of passive over these years, based on what I've just mentioned here, has led to the truth that passive timekeeping plays an important role, a good supporting role, as a feature within a modern timekeeping system. It's a memory trigger. It helps me remember if I'm looking for missing time. It at least puts me in the moment of time so I can be factual and I can be accurate and credible. But it started back in the days as a starting point, and it's going to be driving the timesheet. And that has sort of been balanced out over time, and it's playing a role as a good supporting system. And actually, it's been sort of demoted as a feature in any system as opposed to a system in itself. And I think it's found its home in this area. I think we have another poll, Gail. Maybe we can.
Okay, it's up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would suspect the answer to this poll would be over 50% are using passive timekeeping. It's a guess.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. So if you want to vote, do it now.
Okay.
Okay. And there are the results.
36 and 24. Okay. So it's over 50%. But I think the driver selectively is exactly it. Yeah. So very predictable results here. It's selectively used. Again, it's found its role. I think that's and I think the survey supports that truth as well. Okay, thank you, Gail. 5, AI's role in timekeeping. I call it slow your roll. Before we look at timekeeping and AI, first of all, what qualifies as a potential good AI target in law or in the legal industry? And if you go by pure definition, high volume, unstructured data, labor-intensive processes, and instances where machine can do better than man, especially over time, because obviously AI is a progressive technology where it gets better over time. It's a trained mechanism. So that's what the qualifiers are, and there's many or a good number of potential targets for AI. Document review being one of them, contract review being another. They're the low-hanging fruit opportunities. But where does timekeeping fit in, and should it be a target, and where should it be prioritized? Does it qualify as an obvious target for AI? Well, it's got low volume, relatively speaking. 8 transactions per day, 8 to 10 on average. It's primarily structured. Obviously there's a database behind it, and it's field centric. It's not really labor intensive, and we've got technology now that is especially consumer tech that's helping. So in the pure definition of what I mentioned above, it's very difficult to say where should it be prioritized. Some of the early adopter firms are experimenting with AI in the creation of phased task codes, and they're using the only unstructured piece of data associated with timekeeping, the narratives, to generate these codes. But the question becomes, we're talking about 2 fields. What is the accuracy rate? There's obviously an audit that has to be done in training the engine, and is the investment worth the return? That's yet to be seen. So are we looking here for another magic pill? We're putting in time entries. We're going to 1, 2, 3, 4 fields are ready to enter 5 and 6. Do we have to go to an AI engine, or should we be looking more first? I'm not saying AI is not its place here, but should we be looking more at intelligent systems, intelligent UI, timed prompting, where the system is intelligent enough to know where you stand, what you've used, what part of what kind of work and inventory you've been capturing lately, and doing suggestions, obviously predictive lookups and templating. These are all what we call characteristics of intelligent systems, and that might supersede AI in this area. So if I was going to, based on my experience, I would look at intelligent systems first. So the truth here is AI may be too expensive right now for timekeeping. There's other low-hanging fruit opportunities, but intelligent timekeeping systems may be a better bet in how we can, really capture those tags that I was talking about, so our time inventory can be used as a valuable data source. Timekeeping KPIs, introducing the super metric. One of the metrics that has come to fruition over the last 3 or 4 years is the velocity to capture. We also call it lag to capture. Essentially the measurement between when time is entered and when time is recorded in electronic form. Simply stated, if I put in time daily, my lag is 0. If I put time in on Friday for Monday, my lag is 4. As an example. We've seen a lot of downstream metrics in the industry used. I've been in the business of law for 25 years, realization at the billing and collection level, net income requirement, DBOs, and there's a slew of others. But most of the metrics on time have been hours worked, hours recorded. You know, if I could get my 140 hours in or per month, I'm good. But the level of quality of time inventory has never really been, you know, scrutinized to any degree, and especially at an objective level. So the question here is, timekeeping should be measured by the quality of the inventory, or timekeeping performance. So 140 hours entered in a month is not an indication of timekeeping performance. That's a business metric. How good are people capturing should be measured by the quality of the time inventory. The beauty of this is that if we measure the quality of time inventory, how it's going in and how effective it is, all the downstream metrics, i.e. the realization metrics, all the way from the billing, all the way to collections, right into profitability, are impacted by this one upstream metric. So, you know, if you're going to start somewhere, start at the top of the transaction cycle. And that's where we measure that velocity at the beginning of the transaction cycle, which is at time. So measuring timekeeping performance, another truth here, measuring timekeeping performance using the velocity metric or the lag metric. So you use policy and technology to improve it. And you'll notice that many downstream metrics will improve as well. And this has been firm validated. So a good exercise for some of your firms here attending is, you know, do your velocity metrics by attorney, go to your realization metrics by attorney, put the list side by side and see the correlation. There is one. You know, the ones with the lower, the better lag, or the shorter lag, the improved velocity, will typically have better realization. So, you know, it's a good exercise to do, and that's just a testament to the correlation between the upstream metric and the downstream metrics. We have another poll here. Thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Gail.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a moment.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna close the poll.
Fantastic.
Results.
Okay, so yeah, this is very interesting. 27%. That's quite good. The fact that you know, some of our other polls indicate we're using specialty systems for time recording, and we're also using passive timekeeping. So we're sort of this audience is pretty much on board with the specialized system, but the metric that we're using seems to be sort of the what we call more the old school metric, and not one that's directly correlated to timekeeping performance. So it might be something to look at to get a better metric of performance. We have firms that have actually tied this metric right into attorney reviews, and you know, some of the avant-garde firms, provided they get this metric to a level that's you know, good, even promoted in their business development efforts, saying, you know, we value you know, diligent and accurate registration of work, and that's a duty to our clients in the delivery of our services, and they will actually promote it, you know, provided it's a good metric. Just to share that we've seen metrics in velocities, you know, as high as 6 or 7. I've seen them down to 1, and even in the 0.7, 0.8 range as well. So lot of opportunity here in terms of using this metric to create efficiencies internally, but then also improve the relationships or use it as part of a campaign in business development. Thanks, Gail. Mobile timekeeping, Reflex or not. So misconception here, if I'm not mobile, I don't need mobile timekeeping. I look at it differently. I don't even like the word mobile timekeeping. It's just timekeeping, you know, on a different endpoint. And the question is, if it's a good endpoint and it promotes contemporaneous, you know, it could be used in the office, away from the office. It's irrelevant. The question is, if it improves my, I'm going to use the word velocity or my lag, it's a good thing. So we have, you know, we've seen attorneys that put in the majority of their time on their mobile device, and they're not at the office. They're using the devices in the office or pads or whatever. So it's, I think it's a misconception to label mobility and associated with, you know, where you work. It's an endpoint. In terms of mobile success stories, if we measure by it, there's very few levels of success if we measure by level of adoption, because our level of adoption in the industry, when I talk to IT, is everybody's not using it. And then we label this as not successful. However, when we look at the newfound revenue, there are many success stories in the mobility world here and in mobile timekeeping. So it's just the question is, how do we define success? If it's level adoption, we got a ways to go because we don't have the Reflex. But if it's about revenue, we have a lot of success stories, and typically their ROI on any mobile investment is usually under 3 months. So it's staggering, and I've seen staggering numbers coming out of mobile timekeeping. As far as adoption, what I've seen in the industry is always in the area of, you know, 30-35%, what I call rotational participation. You know, some people use it, some people don't in any given month, but at the end of the day, it contributes to revenue. And what a lot of firms are not realizing is that it is an endpoint and it should contribute to just another method to get time in quicker, irrespective if it's used in the office or out of the office. So, I mean, obviously the last point's it's a great place to start, you know, promote it as an endpoint, and an area where I've seen it a little bit, but not much. Mobile timekeeping is consumer tech. And if you're gonna try to gain Reflex or gain adoption, you gotta match the marketing with the technology. If it's consumer tech, we need consumer marketing. And what I mean by that is, you know, a simple example is a running app or a health app. Your feedback loops are created by the app. You know, congratulations, you've surpassed your best time or your longest distance. Here's a summary of your last month. There's so many opportunities here, so many opportunities to leverage newfound time revenue coming from mobile timekeeping in terms of creating feedback loops back to the attorneys on their device, saying, you know, here's your last month, you know, here's the newfound time that you've brought in, and it's just a motivator, and that's going to create a Reflex, and you're going to win on contemporaneous, you're going to win on revenue, and it's a win all around. It's a little bit of effort, but the data's there, the device is there, the engagement by the attorneys is there. It's just a question of doing a little bit of internal marketing and create that feedback loop, and that those measures of success based on revenue and adoption will be fantastic on both sides, revenue and adoption. So the truth here, it's currently at the revenue level, not at the adoption level, but universal use and consumer level marketing is required to drive this higher and create that high Reflex that we're talking about. Another poll here.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. This should be interesting because we just talked about this. What is success? And I think the industry looks at success as the level of adoption. So I suspect it'll be more on.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it.
No.
And there are the results.
Oh, right down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's split down the middle, yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's the question of and I think it would have been wise to ask the question on how, what is success? Is it revenue or is it adoption? But the ones that do use obviously are highly successful. It's just getting the second tier users in, and that's about creating the reflex that we just spoke about. Okay, thank you, Gail. Compliance versus revenue, healthy coexistence or conflict of interest. And this is really a question of what's coming out in the last 2 years. The idea of compliance outside council guidelines has come into the, it's arrived, and it's in the timekeeping zone now. We want to make sure we're compliant early, but the question is, where do we impose compliance, and can we jeopardize revenues in the process? What we're saying here is quite simply, it should be phased and separated. Interaction is the key here, meaning I want the flexibility of capture so I can easily get the revenue down, but at the same time, I need a staged process where compliance comes in at the right time, in the right dosage, so that we could comply as well. If we put both together, there could be a battle between revenue and compliance. So any firm wants both, obviously, and today's timekeeping system should have the ability to plug the compliance check, or simply the validation checks in at the right time, so it's not impeding the capture or the effective capture of the revenue. So compliance revenue can coexist. It's just about fluid separation within the timekeeping system of these two roles. So, and most timekeeping systems, or at least the best of breed timekeeping systems, have connector points that will not create that conflict of interest and win on both sides. Number 9, opportunity intersection of time. This is something where, we went through the first point and we talked about a billable hour, and timekeeping is obviously not going away. Again, we talked about the new conversation, and it's that new conversation that's gaining more attention in terms of, it being as a valuable data source for pricing. So in fact, when I started in this industry, and I compared to today, there is much more interest in, that asset, the timekeeping inventory as an asset and a valuable asset, and it's getting a lot of attention from leadership today, much more so than in the past. The thing here, we have a process that there's daily engagement by professionals and staff, and what that does is there's opportunity, because it's a guarantee. They're engaged in this technology every day. There could be the opportunity to leverage this engagement point, which is done daily. And now that we're introducing consumer tech to the fold, multiple endpoints, it's extending outwards, there's an opportunity to leverage the user experience. So there is an opportunity here. In our world, what we're doing in our systems is we're trying to add more value at the intersection of time. One of the areas where we're looking at a lot is about forecasting and workload management, where if you're there already, why not do something else? Because let's leverage the engagement point, and why create a separate UI when we could see we can add something at this point to make it easier. So these are just some examples, but there is opportunity at this intersection, and it's something that should be looked at. So we say, seize it, so look at opportunities that can be done right there and then. It's definitely a place that can be exploited in tech. So the system should be flexible enough to add an extra value layer, as I say, to this process. And finally, we're ending on consumer tech here. Apple pie and ice cream, they go together. Timekeeping is perfect now, and we've seen the polls. We're past at 50%, at least with this audience. Mind you, it's a little bit skewed because anybody who's signed up here has got a special interest. Obviously, the stats are a little bit lower in the industry as a whole. But we all know that attorneys dislike time entry. They procrastinate if they can. We've seen examples of the magic pill. If there's a magic pill, not only will we gravitate toward, but we'll pay a lot of money for it to relieve the pain of entry. But we have they're power users now. Attorneys users are power users of consumer tech. They're fully engaged. They already have a natural reflex here. And if we apply this, we're going to relieve the pain and create that, contribute to more contemporaneous and a natural reflex. That's what I'm saying. It can be used in the office, outside the office. It doesn't matter. It's the way it's promoted. So this area is, consumer tech is the magic pill now. There's no side effects. Unlike some of the other areas that we talked about, there's a potential side effects. In this area, there are no side effects. It can be exploited. And frankly, why invest in best of breed? I think one of the main value propositions here is, can best of breed accommodate, multiple endpoints, i.e. we talked about the device mesh and moving out into other endpoints, and timekeeping is going to be branching out into taking advantage of those endpoints, and best of breed has to keep up. And that's where the value is going to come, and that will fuel improved timekeeping performance. And that's it. Those are the 10 truths. I think we covered a broad spectrum. If you have any questions, this is the time. I'm glad to answer them. And fire away.
Okay, well, Peter, thank you once again for a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and launch the evaluations. If you could take a few moments and just fill that out, that would be great. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box. Okay, we do have one. Copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, we will be posting that with the recording, probably within a day or two. Okay? That was an easy question, Peter. I could handle that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions, please enter them into the Q&A. As I stated, if you haven't taken the evaluation, please do. This helps us with future programming. All right, Peter, I don't see any questions, so this is good. Oh, wait, here we go. How do you see the future of e-billing intermediaries? Thanks. Oh, so sorry. Tongue-tied there. Intermediaries. E-billing, yes.
If I understand the question, I mean, obviously, e-billing falls into that area of compliance. All timekeeping systems obviously have to address it and obviously bring e-billing into validation at source, which is the timekeeping area. So our involvement, all the timekeeping vendors, systems should have a perfect plugin for any external e-billing validation, or be able to facilitate validation that is native to the timekeeping system or found anywhere. I know in our systems we have something called third-party validation, where it's been engineered to accept validation from any source, knowing that firms want to bring compliance close to the point of entry. E-billing is just one example of compliance as a as a whole. And timekeeping systems have to have that plugin or intimate plugin so that validation is transparent within the application. Again, not at the expense of capture, as I mentioned.
Okay. All right. That's about it. I don't think we have any more. Are we? Okay. I think that's it. So why don't we go ahead and end this?
Perfect.
Okay. And all right, everyone. Thank you for attending. I appreciate the time. Look forward to you on the next webinar. All right, Peter, once again, thank you. And everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gail.